Good evening. Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law and business law attorney for the law office of Eric M. Sauver, and I host this weekly show every Tuesday night at 5 p.m., where I have guests that are live and we discuss issues that affect businesses, both small and mid-sized companies and organizations, particularly in light of the pandemic. And so we cover issues involving employment and labor law. We talk about business law issues, and we have future guests who could motivate, educate, inspire us. And in that vein, I'm happy to welcome today my guest, debbi.muno, who is a managing director of Janus North America. And Debbie, I'll give you a more proper introduction in a moment, but I wanted to say welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, my pleasure. I think we have a very interesting topic that people are going to really get much out of. So, and I think I'll launch into that and then segue into an introduction of you, and we can begin what should be an interesting conversation.
Great.
So, great. The topic for tonight is emotional intelligence in the workplace, using EI to enhance communication and conflict resolution. And my guest tonight is, as I mentioned, Ms. debbi.muno. Debbie is a managing director of Janus North America. She is an entrepreneur with a keen insight into the value of emotional intelligence in the context of employer-employee relationships. Debbie's diverse background paved the way for her current career. She co-hosted a weekly children's TV show from ages 12 to 15. Debbie was also a competitive gymnast until age 20 and started an assessment business with her husband in 1998, and then co-founded the EI Academy in 2016 with her husband, Jeff, as an extension of their mutual passion for emotional intelligence. And most recently, formed Janus North America in a partnership with Janus International. And Ms. Muno's work with Janus gives her the amazing opportunity to work with internal and external coaches, consultants, and trainers, including organizational development specialists, L&D professionals, human resource professionals, corporate trainers, and business owners, enabling them to become certified Janus emotional intelligence practitioners and to fill this critical need of advancing EI inside of their client companies and organizations. And in her personal time, debbi.muno enjoys yoga, snow and water skiing, sports of all kinds, mysteries, wine, comedies, superhero movies, very nice, I like that. The Science Channel, her family, including her husband, Jeff, as mentioned, and their basset hound, Humphrey. So with that impressive background, once again, Debbie, welcome. It's great to have you on tonight.
Thanks, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about something that I'm so passionate about. So I know we've got an hour to chat. I have a feeling that we might move through that time pretty quickly together.
I think so, yes. I find all my guests, the topics tend to go rather fast and time flies by. But we'll just cover whatever we can, and we have some good questions and topics on the table here. So speaking of which, the topic for tonight's show, as I mentioned, so the background of the topic, as Debbie and I were speaking about it, is really the following: that emotional intelligence has been gaining recognition as a key ingredient for success and happiness. And that's whether in business, whether you're a business owner or an employee, whether you're creating career advancement, partnership, and life. And it includes having the awareness of one's emotional reactions and feelings and internal programming, as well as the ability to separate oneself out from impulsivity that may come with powerful emotions. And it also includes the empathy to see another's perspective without being clouded by anger, fear, or judgment. So what happens when exposure to prolonged chronic stress and trauma, like let's say 11-month pandemic, a politically tumultuous year, economic downturns, other challenging events, to name a few, what happens when these events weigh on our individual and collective minds? How does the lack of EI, of emotional intelligence, contribute to conflict between employers and employees, or business owners and their clients? And how does it create more stress and unhappiness? And so this is basically a topic that Debbie and I came up with in light of what Debbie does. And with that, I wanted to ask you, Debbie, I guess the first question is, how important is it for employers to increase their emotional intelligence in the workplace?
My response, Eric, is completely biased when I say to you, if I returned the question and said, how important is it for us as human beings to have oxygen? We would say, that's pretty important for our survival. And really, this is the nature of emotional intelligence. It is that critical because we are emotional creatures. We human beings have had emotional centers in our brains for eons, and all of us are descended from our very nervous ancient ancestors who had to navigate with only those emotions, right? Without verbal centers, without the ability to speak to one another. And so our emotional status is really what makes us human. And yet it is the thing that often gets in the way of us being the social creatures that we are, and cohabitating and working together and forming solid work units and solid family units. So emotional intelligence, Eric, has been around forever. I think if you and I went back 500 years and asked someone, hey, would you rather work for or with someone who treated you really well and you felt respected and you felt as a valued member of the team? Or would you rather work for a jerk? I think we know how that person would have responded. If
Sure.
we move forward 500 years and ask that group of people the same question, I think we also know how they're going to respond. And so it's not that this notion of being smart about our emotions is new, but it is a new thing to be able to have the technology to effectively measure how we demonstrate emotional intelligence and how we get better at it. So it really underpins all of our relationships as humans, our peer-to-peer relationships, our relationships with our supervisors or with our direct reports, our relationships with our partners and our kids and our families. This is the secret sauce that really contributes to those successful relationships, or those relationships being successful or not. And in the workplace particularly, which is what you and I have been talking about, when that's unsuccessful, the resulting conflict and often widening and deepening of that conflict is how folks end up in your office. So emotional intelligence for employers and employees is just it's not a soft skill, it's an essential skill for the workplace today.
Right. Debbie, you said a few things that really struck a chord, stuck out to me, including the last point, which I'll say, I was thinking this when you started to go there, that I practice employment law, as you know, and in business law, and I help small, mid-sized companies and business owners, entrepreneurs in all fields. And no matter what field I'm dealing with in terms of a client, whether they are in construction or technology, whether they're in website design, or an architect or an accounting firm, it seems that often many conflicts I've found could have been staved off or somehow preempted, nipped in the bud, but for the lack of emotional intelligence, lack of really ways to handle conflict in a healthy way, which often led either to disgruntled employees who may have had a genuine bona fide beef with their employer, and now they have an actionable claim, or may actually have no real claim, but they might have a certain, say, circumstances or events that they might intuit or believe this is why I was let go, and then they might file a discrimination claim. So I really agree with you on that point. And I think one of the things you said that I just really want to highlight, which stuck out for me, is how crucial our emotions are for our functioning as human beings, and yet how this crucial thing can sometimes, right, be our downfall. And I think that anyone who's ever sent, an email and then said, oh, I shouldn't have sent that, right? I should have counted to 10, or, should have had some restraint there, anybody, let's say, like, who has, blown off their boss or it's really, so I think it really is critical to, as you said, to have this skill. It is important, which, gets me to the next question, which is, what are some of the traits then of people, because you're in this field that you see, that have, like, let's say, a high EI quotient, high emotional intelligence quotient?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'm so thankful that you asked it because emotional intelligence and the way that we work in emotional intelligence, we're talking about demonstrated emotional intelligence. Not so much what does someone have the potential to do, or what do they have the ability to do, and actually has nothing to do with their personality or how they're hardwired, but has everything to do with what they do. And so I realize when I say that every one of your listeners is now singing the Baby Shark song. But it really is about what we do, how we show up. And so the skill set of people who have higher demonstrations of emotional intelligence or exhibit more emotional intelligence more frequently, it really is a skill set. These are individuals who either have intentionally crafted these skills, right? Just like us working out and wanting to get stronger or have bigger biceps, we can't just think about that. We actually have to do something about that. Excuse me. We have to do something about that. We have to take action, and we have to repeat that action to grow and develop that skill. So people who have higher demonstrations of emotional intelligence, they either have intentionally worked to develop these things, right? They've been around someone who is emotionally intelligent and they sort of observed how that person treated them or behaved around others and began modeling that behavior, or they've intentionally gone through some programs to lift emotional intelligence. They've measured where they are and where they have opportunity to grow. But really the commonality, the common skills that these people have are initially, they're very present. They are dialed in. These are active listeners. These are people who firmly understand how they're feeling at any given moment of time, paying attention to how the person that they're speaking with or the people they're speaking with are feeling. And they are really in the moment. Now, we hear that a lot, right? Just be present, be in the moment. Sometimes people struggle to know, what does that mean? It means that we are actively dialed in. We are not in any way disconnected. We know when we are joyful, and we know when we are triggered or frustrated or angry, right? So being present. Secondly, is these are people who are really good at having empathy and taking the perspective of others. I'm sorry, there's an Amber Alert here, and that's what I'm watching and turning off. These are people who are really good at putting themselves in someone else's shoes, really viewing something from a different vantage point other than their own, even when it's an opposing perspective, just seeking to understand that perspective. So being empathetic. These are also individuals who we would describe as being genuine or trustworthy. Their word is their bond. They honor their commitments. They keep their promises. They express how they're feeling, but they do it in the right place, at the right time, to the right degree, and to the right people. And so when people have that, oh, sure, go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, Debbie. I just totally was needing to take a commercial break. So I didn't mean to interrupt your flow. I just
No, not at all.
to make sure we're running on time. But if you hold that thought, we definitely want to come back to it. Folks, we'll be right back here at Employment Law Today on talkradio.nyc. I'm Eric Sarver, host of the show. This is my guest tonight, Ms. debbi.muno. Stick around. We'll be right back with that last thought.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you interested in having a better relationship with yourself, others, and God? Greetings. I'm your host, Dr. George Andow, For the show, A Journey Through into Awareness. On my show, we journey into the awareness that the mind of God is the true seat of our personal consciousness. We join together each Monday at 7 p.m., so tune in on Talk Radio NYC.
Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. battles mental illness? Hi, my name is Albert Daba. I'm the host of the show Extra Innings. Extra Innings, I discuss the topics of wellness, mental health, and the experience of surviving multiple suicides within my family. Listen live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern to Extra Innings for discussions with sports figures, artists, mental health professionals, and many others. That's Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Graham Dobbin. Join me every Thursday evening for the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. We speak to people from business, sport, military, and politics, all around what makes a great leader. The personal experiences of what's worked and, maybe more importantly, what hasn't worked. So that's 7 o'clock every Thursday evening, the Mind Behind Leadership here on talkradio.nyc. Listen to real stories of real leaders.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm here with debbi.muno, the managing partner of Genos International. Debbie is a licensed and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, trainer, and distributor of Genos products. And we were just speaking before the commercial break. By the way, I thought it was a little ironic and kind of humorous that I had to interrupt your point about listening to take the commercial break, but I really wanted to make sure we stayed on track and on time with our radio station and our sponsors. So, but just to recap what we were talking about in terms of my question about what are some of the traits of EI, in people. And Debbie, to your points, from what I heard about, it's not just about having the ability; it's how people actually demonstrate their emotional maturity and the ability to actively listen, to pay attention, to be present in the moment, as opposed to, let's say, being defensive or planning what one's about to say. And also just not to let anger or fear, this is what I'm sort of deducing from what you said, get in the way of empathy. That's what I hear. I hear empathy in terms of, you mentioned standing in somebody else's shoes. And then we went to that commercial break. So I guess what I'm wondering here, though, is we talk about EI. Here's my question. How does prolonged stress, like the stress we talked about from COVID-19, how does that impact our execution of our EI?
Boy, this is such a profound question to ask, Eric. And when we talk with folks about what happens in our brains when we do get stressed or frustrated or angry, it's really something that's quite eye-opening. And so I'm going to use a phrase that you just said, is that we can't allow, or we don't allow, anger or stress to get in the way, right? Yet that is how we are biologically hardwired. So if I can tell you just a little bit about how our brains work, I think that will help to really more deeply answer your question about how people are feeling with the stress and anxiety, how EI impacts that, or can impact what we've all been going through with COVID.
Sure.
So the reality of our very human brains is that everything around us, our entire experience, is first perceived in the emotional center in our brain. Now, science will call this your limbic system. I'm not a scientist, right? So I'm just going to say it's our emotional brain. It's the part in our brain where our emotions live, where our memories are stored. And in that part of our brain, we have a very ancient structure that I'm sure many of your listeners know, and you do too. It's called your amygdala. What a lot of people were surprised to know is that we have one on each side, of our brain. And don't do this at home. But if you took this highlighter and you kind of put it here in your eye, and you took another highlighter and you put it in your ear, and you kind of push them together until they met, again, that's not a DIY project,
Right.
but they would meet on each side of your brain at your amygdala, which is really fascinating because all stimuli, everything comes into our amygdala first that we experience. So our amygdala has a huge job, and that little tiny almond-sized structure's job is basically to keep us alive, right? So people will know that as our fear center. It is the thing that determines for us in a nanosecond if something is safe or unsafe, a friend or a foe. So it's like having a router in your brain. And the research says that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60,000 thoughts a day, all of them with an emotion attached to that. So our amygdala are pretty busy all day, but it's one or the other. And when we are in threat circuitry, which is your amygdala has said, hey, now this isn't good, this is dangerous. All of us have experienced this, right? We have all had these moments where we've even expressed that, where we'll say things like, I was so angry I couldn't see straight. Or, I couldn't hear anything. I was so worried, or I was so scared that it was like tunnel vision. I couldn't really see, I couldn't really hear. Those are physiological responses. Just like when we say, I had a gut feeling about that, right? That gut feeling can be not a good one. And that feels very different for us than when you get a gut feeling that feels really good. And so this is our body's way to keep us from stepping off a cliff and from rounding a corner and being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Now, modern day man, we don't have saber-toothed tigers, but we do have the modern day versions of them. And in typical times, these are workplace stresses. So when we're in that threat circuitry, your amygdala says, yeah, this isn't good. And it kicks off this hormonal release in your body. Your adrenal glands kick in, there's cortisol running through your body, oxygen-rich blood drains from your brain and is diverted to your limbs in the event that you need to fight or flee. This is human biology. This is not a conscious choice. We don't say, oh yeah, let my adrenal glands kick in now. This is, for hundreds of thousands of years, how we humans have continued to walk the planet. Now, when we are in reward circuitry, when things are going really well, or we get a really great piece of news, or something's really positive, it's a whole different biological process that happens. Inside of our body now, our amygdala goes, hey, that's great. And the hormonal process now are things that all of us have heard about, right? Oxytocin and dopamine. Now, when that's coursing through us, we call that reward circuitry. We are smarter. I guess that's a loose interpretation. We have better critical thinking skills is probably a better way to say that. We can think more broadly. We want to actively learn, and we can build on that learning. We're really creative. We're super engaged. So whether we are in threat circuitry or reward circuitry, that is our brain keeping us alive. But it's those messages that get sent forward to the executive part of our brain, to our prefrontal cortex, the thing that we humans are really excited about, right? The thing that gives us logical thinking and rational thinking. But how we're feeling, which one of those circuitries we're in, that's what gets pushed forward to our executive center. And it's from there that we base all of our decisions, all of our behavior, all of our workplace performance, our facial expressions, our body language, our tonality, our word choices. All of this is influenced by how we feel, none of which is a choice. This is human biology in a nanosecond to keep us walking upright. So that's really important to know, because our brains are also hardwired with more negative neural pathways than positive. Well, why is that? Well, because it's really important to get those messages in your body that you don't want to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. That keeps us alive. It doesn't keep us alive to notice a gorgeous rose and stop and smell it. That's pleasant. That's not life-saving. So we're hardwired for the negative. That's important to know. So your question was, what is all of this with COVID, all of the stress and anxiety doing to us?
Yes.
Well, number one, It's having all of us on a global scale be in reward circuitry far more frequently than is typical. That happens when we are intensified in our stress or the stress is prolonged. Now, that reward circuitry, remember, those messages are one or the other. So it can be intensely negative or it can be incrementally negative. But when we're in that negative threat circuitry, that's when the adrenal glands are kicked in. This is when oxygen-rich blood is leaving our brains, right, and diverted to our extremities. So what's that doing to us? Well, number one, we're not making the best decisions that we can make. I think about folks who are in a work from home situation where one person is at one end of the dining room table, the partner is at the other end of the dining room table. Maybe there are a couple kids who are in the middle of the dining room table who are supposed to be learning reading, writing, and arithmetic, while one parent is doing their full-time job and the other parent's trying to do their full-time job. That is a massive amount of stress and change to our typical routines. And so that adrenaline kick that happens, it takes about 24 hours for adrenaline to dissipate from your body. When the stress is prolonged, like we are on a global scale, it never gets a chance to dissipate. And so what that stress and anxiety is doing is it's ebbing away at our ability to remain calm. It's ebbing away at our ability to make good choices. We tend to be more snappy. We're on edge. We're irritable. We don't sleep as well as we should be. And then unfortunately, that cycle keeps repeating over and over again. And it erodes away at our physical well-being, our mental well-being, and certainly our emotional well-being. We start having problems in our relationships of all kinds. And when everybody is so uncertain and in such threat circuitry, and employers are trying to keep their businesses afloat, people are wondering if they're still going to have a job. On a global scale, we have this mass experience of being in a constant state of stress. And that is so unhealthy for everyone in so many ways. So when you learn some EI skills and you build resilience, by the way, those are the two things that we're hearing the most: building resilience for employees and building empathy for employees. When you can lift those elements of emotional intelligence, now we're not left coping through these uncertain times. We actually have a chance to navigate. We become more on offense and we get a chance to be able to tackle it productively instead of reacting to it unproductively in so many ways. So it is devastating on many fronts, both professional and personal.
Yes. You know, some thoughts come to mind around what you're saying here and some observations that I think might be important to point out and share. And I will do so after our next commercial break. So we have to take a quick break, folks. I'm Eric Sauver from the law office of Eric M. Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of Employment Law Today. I'm here tonight with a very special guest, my colleague and friend, Ms. Debbi.muno, who is sharing about this crucially important topic. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Wise Content Creates Wealth. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Friday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2. They say content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Every episode features tools and tips for content marketing and business people telling the wise content stories of that success. Tune in every Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber, here with my guest, debbi.muno from Janus. Debbie is a certified and licensed emotional intelligence practitioner, and we're talking today about EI, particularly EI, emotional intelligence, that is, in the workplace, in the employment context, and how enhancing this can increase your communication skills and reduce conflicts. And just to touch on some points that Debbie, that you made before the break, that really stuck out at me, if I may. We talked about COVID-19 and what that is doing to us from a stress level, the prolonged stress, and how that's impacting our emotional intelligence. And you kind of brought it back to some of the physiology and the biology that you talked about earlier this evening, where we're wired for fight or flight. And when we're subject to prolonged stress, the blood even rushes to our limbs, and so we're not thinking as critically. Of course, we're seeking reward when we're under high stress, but we're also maybe perhaps have more strong aversion to negative things that are happening. Our patience is lower. And, I think what jumped out at me were a couple of things. One, the fact that COVID-19, this pandemic, is certainly a very stressful time for people. I mean, it implicates people's survival and issues of mortality and vulnerability. There are economic consequences. There's a lot of confusion, uncertainty, a lot of sudden abrupt changes. I think many of us can remember where we were last year on March 13th or so, when the world just took a giant turn, much like we can with 9/11 and other horrible, tragic days. But what I noticed about this pandemic that's so different, I think you touched upon this, is that it's prolonged and constant. And so there's not really like a break from it. And plus, you mentioned how we often are going to a reward circuitry to get some kind of relief. And I think one of the challenges that I think we see for people, and whether it's in the employment context or in other ways, is that the usual rewards that we often, let's say the healthy rewards, I should say, that we tend to go to, going out to see a live music concert or a jazz club, going to the gym to exercise, maybe, having a workout partner, going to the movies, just things that healthily get rid of stress and are off limits, even or severely impacted depending upon where you are and your physical health and age group and other factors. So I think that's a really big important point. You've got the added stress. You pointed out people in family units, right? With, I know my son, this adorable little guy right here, is 18 months old. That's an old picture, but he's in daycare, and he was home from daycare from March through early August, as my wife and I were working from home, not our offices, with him, taking care of our little guy, who was 7 months old at the time, and he's in daycare now, and it's going wonderfully, thank goodness. But it was quite stressful, and I think a lot of parents in that situation, and certainly people who are not parents. So I'm just kind of reflecting on what you said. I also would just note the interest in that we are wired more negatively to have those negative reactions to negative and awareness of that. And the last thing I'll say is that, I think one reason why I've seen so many people, if you notice, their stress levels are so high when it comes to three issues. their job or their career, their employment or their business, right? Their finances, how much they have in the bank and savings, and their partnerships, their marital or relationships, intimate personal relationships, how those three are the big ones that can cause stress. And I think that, in employment situations, what I've noticed as an employment law attorney, whether it's I represent employees or employers, is that a lot of emotions run high and a lot of anger and fear, and people lead with their emotions. And part of that might be that fight or flight, because what's being threatened in employment? I mean, you've got people identify their employment with, right, financial security, with self-esteem, their emotion, their emotional well-being, their dignity, their ego, and just a feeling of connection. And so when that is turned upside down, you mentioned working from home or companies, firing or furloughing, it creates stress. And so if people aren't, say, learning how to up their game with the emotional intelligence front, they'll often end up in my office as an employment law litigator. So I'd like to see that not happen. I'd much rather see people, come to me for things like employee handbooks and employment contracts and more. But even though I do represent people in court, of course. But so I guess my question to you is, I know you mentioned when we spoke the other day about you have a tool or an exercise, an example of a tool that we can use to enhance our emotional intelligence around the workplace. And I volunteered to be the guinea pig, because I'm the host of the show, for this tool. And would you like to jump into that with me? I've got my pen ready, and folks at home want to join in, grab a pen and paper. Or if that's too old school for you, grab your iPhone or your tablet or iPad or laptop. And Debbie had some questions you wanted to ask, right? And I'm happy to answer them.
I do. So just a couple of things to note that you said that was just so critical, Eric. So number one, we are social creatures as human beings, and the rewards that we typically would do that we enjoy that are removed from us, we can be more intentional now about finding another way to craft that connectivity, right?
Mhm.
So Zoom calls with friends, or making sure that you do something jointly. I know folks who had like holiday dinners when they had an iPad set up and they kind of zoomed their way through the dinner. So we just have to be intentional about that. And the second thing also is the human brain absolutely unequivocally, hates uncertainty. And so the uncertainty of all of the things that you mentioned will put us into that threat circuitry. And we have been in uncertainty for a year now, with still more uncertainty ahead of us. So we have to be really mindful about, number one, being aware that that's what's happening for us. And number two, having the skills to offense that, to really be able to navigate and deal with that. So the exercise that I have for you is, first of all, this exercise is really to help you and the listeners kind of position emotional intelligence in a very quick way. And then I do have some tools and some tips that are pretty simple and straightforward that folks following your show can start to implement little bits and pieces into your daily lives, professionally and personally, that can start to help tick up our ability to put others and ourselves into reward circuitry. So we can't go to the movies anymore, but we can certainly tell someone how much we appreciate them or how much we value what they do for us. So let's first do this quick exercise, Eric. And this is to position what we mean about emotional intelligence. So I would like you to first think of the very best person who you've ever worked for or with. Don't tell me unless you would like to have that on your show. But I just want you to at least have the mental image of who that is. And if you want to scratch their name down on your worksheet or a piece of paper in front of you, just to keep it forefront. And I'm going to ask you just 6 quick questions about them. And I'd like you to rate them on a 1 to 5 scale. Where 1 is, hey, the thing that you just said, Debbie, they do it significantly less than other people. A 2 is they do it less than other people. A 3 is pretty much like other people I know. Rating them a 4 would say, ooh, they do this more than other people. And rating them a 5 is like the rock star rating, right? This is like, hey, they do this significantly more than other people. Okay, so do you have a person in mind?
Well, first to make it the number 1 and 2 and 3, to make sure I hear it, the 1 is obviously the lowest, and that is that they do this much less frequently than other people.
Significantly less than other people. You got it.
Got it. I want to make sure I'm really clear on the numbers so I can give an accurate assessment. And then, of course, 2 was a little bit
Less
they do more
than.
frequent, right? And then 3 once again was
Pretty average, typical,
Average.
just like other people. That.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay, great.
On
Yeah, I
par.
think I want to make sure I heard you correctly there. Okay, 4 more. Okay, got it. Yes, and I have the name of a person in mind. Okay,
Excellent. You can keep that close to your vest. Just
Sure.
want you to have that in your mind. So the first question I'd like you to think about this best person is how well do they or did they understand the impact that their behavior had on other people? How well did they understand the impact that their behavior had on others? So give them a 1 if it was like, oh, they did that significantly less than others, and give them a 5 if they really had a handle on that.
I would say a 4, keeping the
All
person
right.
in mind, and keep the names to myself because a lot of my former people I work with are colleagues of mine, and some are even clients, and some are watching possibly. So I'm going to keep that, but I would definitely say a 4.
We can have that Eric and Debbie EI privilege between us, right?
Right, there we
We'll
go.
keep it that way. Second thing, how well do they or did they make others feel appreciated?
Yes.
Others
Also,
feel appreciated.
I'd say also a 4.
4, okay.
Yeah.
How about being open and honest about their mistakes?
I'd say a 3.
Okay. How about making ethical decisions?
Ethical, I would give them a 5.
Excellent. What about managing their emotions effectively in difficult situations? Things got tough.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this person.
Effectively being the key word there.
Right, sure. Well, with the scale you gave me, I'm gonna give them a 4.
Okay. And the last question here, how well do they or did they recognize others' hard work and achievements?
That I'll give this person a 5.
Excellent. Okay. Now I'm going to do the math for you and tally that up. And I'd like you to think, give me one word. Let's do it this way. Give me one word that best describes how this person makes or made, I don't know the timestamp, makes or made you feel.
One word that describes how they make or made me feel.
Right. How they made you feel.
Right. I would say proud of their work.
Okay. And how would you describe them? Give me one word that you would use to describe them.
Compassionate.
Ooh, love it. Okay. And then the last question about the best is when you are working for or with them, how motivated were you? Right? On a 1 to 10 scale, where 10 is like, yeah. And a 1 is like, I'm counting the minutes until I can like go to lunch.
Yeah, that's an easy one. I'm already pretty motivated as it is, but I'd say a 10.
Excellent.
And let me say one thing, Debbie. We need to take one more commercial break. When we come back, I definitely want to finish the exercise, get to the least favorite person, as well as get to all the tips you mentioned. I would love to just hand the floor to you to share that with our viewers. And
Absolutely.
So let me just say that once again, folks, if you've joined us late, I'm Eric Sauver, host of Employment Law Today, here with debbi.muno, managing partner at Janus International, and we're speaking about emotional intelligence in the employment context. Stick around, we'll be right back.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law, business law attorney. And so this topic tonight about emotional intelligence in the context of employment in the workplace is one that I find very valuable. And so with that, I'm really pleased to have debbi.muno on our show tonight. And for those that are just tuning in, Debbie was walking me through an exercise to demonstrate, I imagine, the power of EI in the workplace. And if you're at home listening, if you're an employer or a manager of workers or employees, think about what these scores might do and how it might impact your employees. So Debbie, you went through with me before the commercial break, the good person I worked with, the best person, and how I rated their different traits, how they made me feel. I mentioned proud, how I described them, compassionate, how much I felt motivated to work on a scale of 1 to 10. I gave it a 10. And now I think you wanted to get to the least favorite person, who shall also remain nameless and is written down on my paper for my eyes only. But I have them in mind. I did not forget about the person, even though it's been a long time.
Rarely do we ever forget about either of these people, but this one especially, Eric.
Right, sure.
Yeah. So let's give it a go, right? We're going to go through the same questions. I'm going to have you answer with a score of 1 to 5, where 1 is, hey, they do this significantly less than other people, up to a 5, they do this significantly more than other people. Yes. So keeping in mind now this worst or most difficult person you've ever worked for or with or around, how well do they or did they, I sense it was past tense, so that's good.
Yes.
How well did they understand the impact that their behavior had on other people?
How well did they understand that, with the 1 being the lowest? I'm going to say 1. If I could say 0 or a half, I would, but I'd say 1.
Okay. Yeah. Occasionally, folks will start to award negative points when we get to this side. So, we're not being so formal in an assessment standpoint, but we'll give them a 1, give him or her a 1. How about making other people feel appreciated?
A 2.
Okay.
Every now and then
How about being open and honest about their mistakes? Open and honest about their mistakes.
A 1.
A 1. Very definitive 1. So that brings the next question about ethics. How about making ethical decisions?
Definitely a 1.
Okay. Which
was difficult to work around as an attorney, as you can imagine, which is why I stopped working there. But yes, a 1.
I can't imagine. How about managing their emotions effectively in difficult situations? Again, effectively in difficult situations.
Effectively, then I have to say a 1.
Okay. And the last question, what about, I might know the answer to this, or at least the leaning of this, but what about recognizing others' hard work and achievements?
I'd say a 2.
That's a 2. Okay. I'm going to tally that up while you tell me how this person made you feel.
Back at the time, I'd say demoralized.
Oof, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's a long time ago, and I had to reach back a number of years.
How long ago, if I can ask?
It was 1999, thereabouts.
And it was not a partying like 1999, like the Prince song, I take it.
No, it was not. At least not on the work front. But
what word would you use to describe this person?
I'm smiling, my sense of humor, to joking, say there are no cursing on my show. So no, I'm totally kidding, actually. What word would I use to describe this person? I would say erratic.
Yeah, sometimes this exercise can get colorful. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that we are on live. Okay. so-
Erratic seems to be a word I'm comfortable describing them with.
Okay. And let's talk about the motivation. On a scale of 1 to 10, was it more like, yes, or was it more like, 1 to 10 scale, what would you say? I'm going to send you a message, Eric. Yes, you just never know what happens when you go live. So we've got a little bit of a technical issue. So I'm working the chat. We'll see if we can get Eric's response in through the chat until he's able to come back and join us. Okay, so it looks like Eric is going to log out and come right back in. Looks like he's doing that. Hey, you're
Here
back.
I am. Okay, that was sorry about that, folks. My computer just suddenly mysteriously you had frozen and then it went out. So I assure you I did not leave the interview because of the
Yeah, I thought maybe I asked you, the last question was just too much for you to take recalling this person and you said, that's it, I'm out.
The last thing I heard, and apologies to listeners at home, hopefully the recording's still going smoothly. I'm back. Last thing I heard you ask me was about their erratic, I mentioned, to describe them. And
Yep.
then my screen got frozen and then I disappeared. So what was
See,
the rest
so,
of it?
right, so these are the things, right? That's a little bit of threat circuitry for you.
Mhm.
I've been on that side when your tech bombs out. And
Sure.
so let me just ask you this question, Eric, because it's very poignant to this. When that happened and you recognized that was happening, what happened in your body? How did you feel?
I felt a little bit like sped up, I'd say, you know, sort of like, and also very focused, ready to focus on my computer, going to the Wi-Fi settings and seeing what was off, what was wrong. And but I also knew I would get back in somehow, whether it's by this or another computer, or calling in from my iPhone. So, but and I want to be mindful to make sure I give you time to talk about your partnership with Genos in the next 5 minutes we have. But so I'm just gonna let you ask the question that you did,
Sure.
and I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
You bet. So our last question, and thank you for answering mine, because that little bit of sped up, that's your adrenal glands going, uh-oh, this is dangerous, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we all feel that in different ways.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So you feel that sped up. So the last question was really around the motivation, right? So when on a 1 to 10 scale, how motivated were you when you worked with this worst person? Did it feel like, yes, or was it more of that heavy sigh of like, oh.
Right. I would say between a 3 or 4, maybe a 4 most days, a 3 on other days. That's how I would say
No,
that.
we'll give you a 3.5. Math wasn't my major, but we'll go down the middle.
Sounds accurate to me. Sounds great.
Okay. So listen, thank you for participating in that. What we call that the EI experience. So the interesting thing about this is those 6 items that I asked you to rate your best and your worst, those come right out of our emotional intelligence assessment. These are doing things, right? These are demonstrations of emotional intelligence. And I asked you to rate these 2 people on this 1 to 5 scale. Now, your responses were extremely different. Well, on one case, out of a perfect 30, which would be a 5 on all of those, your best was a 25 and your worst was an 8. That is a huge disparity in a small sample like this, right? Your best made you feel proud and your worst made you feel demoralized.
Right.
You described your best as compassionate. You described your worst as erratic. And I sense that that was your second word choice for describing your worst. And your motivation scores were also extremely variant, where your best was a 10 and a resounding 10 right away, 10. And the worst was like 3.5 we landed on. So here's the interesting thing about this. It's not you, it's them. It's not you, it's them. You are the same you. You are the same person with the same DNA and the same set of skills and talents who showed up in 2 very different workplaces and was treated very differently. In one place, You were made to be in reward circuitry more frequently. You felt
Mhm.
valued, you felt appreciated, you felt proud. Your work was meaningful, you felt connected and
Right.
empowered.
Hmm.
And you, the same person in an alternate workplace,
Mhm.
were made to feel demoralized. You felt frustrated, angry, stressed, anxious,
Mhm.
I'm guessing. It's not you. The way that we are treated influences everything about us, our behavior, all of our decisions, all of our word choices. So I'll
Right.
ask you, when you came home from those two workplaces,
Mhm.
I'm imagining that those work experiences also impacted your personal life.
Absolutely. And Debbie, if I may, just we have about half minute till the end. As you mentioned in the beginning, time flies when you're having fun. How can people get in touch with you? What's your contact information? Maybe that can kind of take us out. Would it be debbi.muno? Did you have an email address you want to share or phone
Sure.
number?
It's Debbi, debbi.muno, MUNO,
Right.
at Genos International, GENOS international.com. And you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Debbi Muno there. And the website is genosnorthamerica.com.
All right, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm your host, Eric Sovereign, Employment Law Today. I will also put out on social media more of Debbie's contact information. If you like what you heard tonight, tune in next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and stay safe. And Debbie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric, and thanks for participating.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you.
Too.